and went to work in one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals on the planet. Nobody was interested in what these voices were telling schizophrenics. And it was like, it was clear that whatever they were saying, it was affecting their behavior. But they just weren't curious about it. I'd ask all these staff people, well, what are they and what are they saying? And oh, they're just hallucinations. Just don't pay any attention to them. But they weren't even curious.
Welcome to the Mark Attwood Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. How are you? Are you enjoying this process that we're going through? The world is covered in drones right now, which is not going to be the subject of today's show. I will do a video on that soon because it is extremely interesting to me. But what we're going to do today is we're going to dig deeper into the voices in our heads, the demonic entities, something that I've been talking about since I started this podcast. Not by ambition, but by accident, really, or serendipity. When I started the podcast, didn't really know what I was going to talk about during COVID. And then it just came up when I was on somebody else's podcast. I started talking about my earliest memory, being recruited, or demons trying to recruit me when I was 3 or 4 years old, and it was relentless, and they've been relentless ever since. And there's many reasons for this, and it's led me to the conclusions that actually the whole world has been demonically possessed to some degree, without any of us realizing it, because they're very subtle, and what their job is as fourth dimensional entities that feed off us in this realm that we are in, where we're not top of the food chain, is to knock us off the path, or to make us do things that create guilt and shame that lock us in, and to make us ill and not survive that long, because they want to feed off our louche and other things which I don't need to mention here. But what's it like when they fully take somebody over? Because I've heard phrases over the years, over my whole entire life, we're overpopulated and we're destroying the planet, and humans love war and love to murder and all of that. And I've always thought, well, is that true? Is that really true? Or are humans being driven to these things by something else? And a few months ago, or maybe less than that, I interviewed an amazing man called Jerry Marzinsky, who's been working with schizophrenics for a very long time, and he noticed that schizophrenics were having a conversation with some invisible entities, and his academic peers said, "Well, don't go there, because you're just going to encourage them to have more hallucinations." But he pursued, because he's that kind of guy, and has come up with some amazing insights into that. And I did a show on that. And if you haven't seen that show, same with all my shows, everything I do is backed up on my website, which is theMarkAttwoodShow.com. And on here, you can see all the back episodes and other goodies there. Just use this search button here and just type in Marzinsky like this. And this is how you find videos on my website. And there it is. BBC, ABC, NBC, these guys are demonically possessed. 5th of November, I did that video. And so it's easy to find my back catalogue there. But also, because of the nature of this video today, which is going to be extraordinary, I also wanted to share something else with you. As a lot of you know, where did I put it? I published this book about a year ago, God Wins, which is a collection of all the poetry I wrote during COVID. And they all came out originally as videos, and these videos were channeled to me via higher beings, God, actually. One of the days during the middle of that madness, I was actually asked to do a version of something from the Bible, which I'm going to share with you now before we bring my guests on. This is, although it says it's a poem by Mark Attwood, it's actually directly from the Bible. It's just performed by me. And this is the armor of God, and it's something I think we all need at this time. It is time to put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Yeah. So there we go. The armor of God has been extremely useful to me over the last few years, and features heavily in this book, Weapons of Mass Protection, which I wrote with Abby Wynn, which is Practical Tools for Spiritual Warfare. And there'll be a link below the video where you can get all of these things if you're interested in. But for today, I want to bring back my illustrious colleague and guest from Tucson, Arizona, Jerry Marzinsky. Hello, Jerry.
Hey, Mark, glad to be back with you again.
Great to see you. Okay, let's tell the audience why you're back this time.
Well, we got an amazing guest I brought on. Her son was a psychotic killer. She lived through this. He is now on a maximum security in a maximum security prison in isolation. That's how dangerous he is. He was completely taken over by the voices. And I've been studying these voices for most of my career and wondering what they were. And it surprised me when I got to first graduated from grad school and went to work in one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals on the planet. Nobody was interested in what these voices were telling schizophrenics. And it was clear that whatever they were saying, it was affecting their behavior. But they just weren't curious about it. I'd ask all these staff people, well, what are they and what are they saying? And they're just hallucinations. Just don't pay any attention to them. But they weren't even curious. I mean, there were hundreds of staff at this hospital. Not one of them was curious about what these voices were saying. And so I started asking them. And when one of them told a psychiatrist, I ended up in front of that psychiatrist the next morning on the red carpet being told, you will not ask any more questions about the voices. They're hallucinations. And what you're doing by asking patients about what they're saying is you're reinforcing their hallucinations and making them sicker. And he ordered me to stop. Okay. That happened twice at this hospital. So that they don't even want you looking into it. All right. Now, what they're saying is that these voices are auditory hallucinations. Right? So in all the books I studied, I went, well, okay, if they're hallucinations, they're word salad. They don't make any sense. Hallucinations are all over the place. They're positive, they're negative, they're all over the place. But what I found is that these voices ran patterns. And one of the first patterns I found were they were consistently negative. They didn't sway from that. And my first question was, what holds them consistently negative? Why aren't they neutral sometime? Why aren't they positive sometime? Why aren't they like hallucinations, which are all over the place? What holds them on that negative trajectory? All right. The second pattern I found was they were anti-religious. They didn't like schizophrenics reading the Bible. They didn't like them going to church. They would mock Jesus. They would mock religion. They would keep them from going to church. And if they did go to church, they got louder and tried to drive them out. Okay. The third pattern I found was that they were energetic parasites. After these voices attacked these patients, they were energetically drained. They didn't have any energy left. And when I started asking the patients about that, they didn't even realize it until I brought it up. Right? And then when I brought it up, I asked them, okay, every time you get attacked by the voices, you're energetically drained. You know, where did your energy go? And they would say, I don't know. And I'd come back with, well, if you were sitting in front of a fire and you stuck your hand in that fire 500 times and each time you got burned, what's burning you? They had no trouble saying, well, it's a fire. But then when I say, okay, you've heard the voices tens of thousands of times over the years, and each time you've heard them, you were energetically drained. What do you think was draining you? The overwhelming answer was, I don't know. They were being blocked from seeing that. Right. And then when you bring it up, they go, oh yeah, I see it now. So these things are also parasites. All right. What they say is consistently negative. And what they will do is they will move in and they will start pushing the original personality out of the way. They start moving to take control. And usually there's a battle there because the person's body, the person's spirit, doesn't know what they are. They don't like it. And they're confused. They're very confused about what's happening to them. Now, what adds to that confusion is the psychiatric mafia saying these things are hallucinations. Your mind is broken. You know, it's shattered. There's something wrong with your mind. Okay. So that adds to it more. And then they say the only thing you can really do about it is take these medications that we have that are indeed toxic, and they're neurotoxins. They will kill brain cells when used over a long period of time. And some of the autopsies they did of long-term state hospital patients that were on these neuroleptic drugs for years, their brains were shrunk like walnuts. Right? So these drugs are not only not curing anything, they're doing neurological damage to these patients. It won't recover. I mean, they're actually killing the brain, right? So, and those medications do not get rid of the voices either. So these voices are energetic in nature. They're not physical. So, you know, pouring Thorazine or these neuroleptic drugs onto the brain does not get rid of them. It's equivalent to trying to pour Thorazine or these psychometric drugs on top of a magnetic field and expect that magnetic field to go away. It doesn't touch it. It doesn't get rid of the voices. All right. So here they are, they have the entire Western world convinced that the only treatment for schizophrenia is their drugs. And their drugs don't work. Nobody's getting better. It may lower the voices, it may weaken them, but 98% of the time it doesn't get rid of them. And if it does get rid of them, as soon as they stop the meds, they return. Okay. So what the Western medical psychiatric model is not working. It's here in the United States, we have 50,000 suicides a year, year after year after year after year. And a great majority of those people are on these psychiatric drugs. Right? They don't work. So what happens is these voices get stronger and stronger and stronger. And I've only seen maybe one or two patients where they completely took over the patient and the person who was there previously is no longer there. They're completely taken over by these drugs. And the first time, or these voices. And the first time I saw that, I was working psych crisis in a hospital emergency room, and this father brought in his son, who had gone completely off his rocker. And what happened is he started hearing these voices while they were in California. The father got a job in Arizona and left his son there with his girlfriend, and moved to Arizona. And I called the girlfriend, and what had happened is the voices were getting stronger and stronger and stronger. This guy couldn't sleep at night. He was pacing the floor all night. He was acting stranger and stranger. The girlfriend started getting afraid, so she would lock her bedroom door at night, and he slept out in the living room. So she was starting to get more and more unnerved by his behavior. Then one night he got up at like 3 a.m. She heard him open the drawer where all the knives and the spoons were, and she looked out the window as he left the apartment, and he went out into the lawn in front of the apartment with a big butcher knife, and he started stabbing the lawn. He got on his knees and he just stabbed the lawn over and over and over again. She saw that and she was completely freaked out. She locked the door, she called the police. He was banging on the door to let her in, or let him in. And she said, I called the police, leave. So he left, and he had nowhere to go. So he called his father in Arizona. His father paid for a ticket for him to come to Arizona. When he got to his father's house, he still was hearing those voices. And when his family called him by his real name, he got furious, and he would tell them, I am not John Doe, Joe Biden, or some other name. And he got furious when they called him by his real name, and he kept repeating, I am not, Joe Biden. Joe Biden is dead. I am this other guy. So every time they called him by his real name, he got furious. And then when his dad did that one time, he attacked his dad physically. Right? And then the brother beat him up, threw him into the bedroom, locked the door, and said, stay in there. And they could hear him talking to the voices while he was in there. So he wasn't getting any better. So they brought him down to the ER, and I got him to psychiatric evaluate. And he swore he wasn't the person he used to be. He was hearing voices, and I had him admitted. But the person who used to be was no longer there. That he didn't recognize his mother and father as his mother and father. He ordered them out of the house and said the house was his. So at that point, they brought him down to the emergency room, where I got to look at him and admitted him. It was the voices that drove him into this. And a lot of times, when the voices first start up, the person is very confused. They don't know what's going on. And they're told that their mind is broken by psychiatry. So that's kind of like that sign, Dante's sign, all who go here, or all who come here give up all hope. Because there is no hope. If your mind is broken, that plays right into their scheme of, oh yeah, just come to us and we'll give you these psychiatric drugs every month at a cost of what, $1,000 a month? So what they want is a something that's treatable but doesn't go away. So they're making $14.7 billion a year, every year, not million, billion, selling these antipsychotic drugs that cure absolutely nothing. They have reduced funding for research into the causes of schizophrenia down to almost nothing. So they do not want a cure. They want you to keep paying them for these drugs. Right? So what we're going to bring on is Janine. I met Janine years ago. Her son murdered, I think, 4 or 5 people. He killed, I think, 3 or 4 in a drug deal. He was sent to prison. he came out and he murdered his girlfriend and cut her into little pieces. They still haven't found her body. But Janine was tracking the voices the entire time. So she watched all this happen. And she can attest to the fact that it was the voices driving her son. So her story is very gripping. It's very sad. She's still in touch with her son. I think she has some pictures that he drew. I have a poem that he wrote about his voices. And we're going to turn it over to Janine now to let you hear her story of what she went through with a son who was completely driven by these voices.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Joe. Let's bring Janine in. Hi, Janine. How are you? How are you? You're currently muted, so I'm just sorry. I'll just have to unmute you there. Yeah, sorry.
Oh my goodness. Hi. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. That's quite it's quite a hard introduction to listen to. So I'll just pass it over to you guys.
Jerry, where should we start?
Well, tell them how where it started with your son, when he started hearing voices. When did you notice? When did you realize that they were voices, and when did you realize that they weren't him?
Okay. So first of all, I had Donovan at a very young age. I was 15 when I got pregnant, and I was 16 when he was born. He's now 47. Okay. So right off the bat, you need to understand, I was a very young woman raising a child, and Donovan and I grew up together and had pretty much of a sibling rivalry. Okay. So you have to understand the whole picture behind the scenes about how we communicated. And so I was a single mom. I wasn't married. The dad wanted nothing to do with Donovan. So that's kind of where it started for us, Donovan and I. With that being said, when I was in college, there was a period of time when Donovan had 3 little friends he played with in his imaginary world. And it was always that way. He had 3 friends, and they had names. I'm not going to say the names. And I started noticing his playmates when he was about 4. Okay. And so he was active with them. They weren't harmful to him. To me, in my mind, I think about this, and Jerry, I've told Jerry this, they kind of reminded me of like little gremlins, because they were kind of, mischievous. And, with somebody like Donovan at the time, when he was just such a young boy, I had no knowledge of what anything was going on, other than he had imaginary friends, and everybody said, oh, that's normal, for kids to have that. Fast forward to when he was about 12, started noticing I got married for the second time, and I had 2 boys. And my husband then started noticing that there were bruises on the kids. So and this was in the 90s, mid to late 90s. And it wasn't, it was actually in the 80s, because it was in the 80s, because my youngest one was 1.5 years old, and my other one was a little bit over 2. So he started noticing, we both started noticing, we talked in bed, what's going on with the boys? Have you noticed there's, bruising on him? So he stuck a camera, in a place. And back in those days, those cameras were really big. And he put the camera, and he videotaped Donovan taking a basketball and throwing it on my youngest son's head. He was 18 months at the time. And then he videotaped, and then on the same video was where Donovan took a pillow and he was trying to suffocate his younger brother, his other brother. When I saw that video, I completely lost it. I called the psychiatrist where I lived at that time. And we decided to go ahead and put Donovan in the state hospital in Colorado, which is where I lived at the time. And so he went into Pueblo, Colorado.
Did you also tell me that Donovan abused animals also?
Yeah. That also was very bad. He, he was known for taking cats and, twisting them around like that and throwing them up against the wall and feeding them antifreeze when we lived on the farm. And he took 22 rifle and shot cows profusely. I'd come back and we'd have cows that were riddled, and the farm hands were like, "Get his kid out of here!"
And that's common with people who are heading towards psychosis. It's the abusing of animals is a red light.
Yeah, he was pretty violent, and then also something else he did was. When he was in school, we lived up in Cripple Creek, Colorado at the time. We had a ranch up there, and he stuck bananas up the tailpipe of the school bus. He was, he was that kid. And then he got, he had to come home from school for like a couple weeks for that little episode, and it just progressively just kept getting worse. And it just never went away. And then when we were going to college,
what effect did the drugs that the psychiatrist put him on have? Any?
There's a lot of drugs I don't remember the name of, but I know Zoloft was one. Thorazine was another one. There were some other antidepressants and other drugs. He's on Seroquel. He was put on a mild case of Seroquel for a while, but right now in prison, I have just recently been told he's on Seroquel. So he's still on Seroquel, he's probably been on that, Jerry, since he was 15.
Yeah, which is an antipsychotic drug, a mild one.
Yeah.
Now, what about when he was a kid? Did those drugs do anything to improve his behavior?
Well, he didn't have a behavior. He was non-functional. When he was on all of the meds, he was like tired all the time.
They turned him into a zombie.
It was awful. And he even came to me one time and he said, "Mom, please, can I stop taking this medicine? I don't want to take it anymore. It doesn't make me feel good." And I did. I said yes. I didn't get any psychiatric approval, but I wish I would have, hindsight being 2020, because you can't just stop taking those drugs.
No.
It's not a good thing.
No.
But he survived. But hindsight being 2020, that wasn't such a good idea.
Well, can I ask you a question, Janine?
Yes.
I mean, as you're telling that story, I'm just thinking about it as a parent, and that I know that happened over years, but how did you deal with that as a mother with these other children that were being harmed? What kind of communication were you having with him?
Well, with Donovan, so that's a very good question, Mark. What happened was that husband at that time, we ended up filing for divorce. He kidnapped my kids and took them to South America.
Whoa.
So from the time that within 6 months after that incident happened, my husband then left me for my bridesmaid, took my kids to South America, and I didn't see them till they were 8, 9 years old. So they were out of the picture. So there was nothing that was said to those kids. Yeah. And so as adults now, and even when they came back, they felt like I had abandoned them. They didn't understand the whole story, but they were also lied to. And there was no absent from it was one of the worst cases of brainwashing, as the court and the divorce and all the lawyers said with the psych evaluations that the kids had. When they finally got back into the country, I had to fight to get their visas back.
How did you deal with Donovan once you saw those videotapes?
I confronted him. Edward and I sat down and we just said, "What is this?" And he just sat there with no emotion on his face.
Didn't faze him at all.
Didn't faze him at all. He just sat there. He couldn't lie and say it wasn't me. He was
Right.
busted, but
Did
he
he make
had
any excuse?
no, none. And that was enough for me. That's why I called the state hospital, because I don't know. I just know that when it came to those boys and the age and what he did and the fact he took the pillow and tried to suffocate, it was like, nuh-uh.
And there's no remorse.
There was absolutely zero remorse. And so when he got into the state hospital, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and with sociopathic schizophrenia with sociopathic with psychopathic tendencies.
Okay.
No,
Did you hear him?
psychopathic with sociopathic tendencies.
Did you hear him talking to the voices at any time during that period of time?
All the time when he was growing up, he had his little friends and he called them by name. He had 3 of them. Now, what I have found out recently with having the phone calls with him in prison is that he got rid of those friends because this other one crept in.
Are you spiritually protected? Are you wearing the armor of God? Are you prepared against the principalities of darkness that currently wreak havoc in our world? Spiritual warfare is a very real thing. Weapons of Mass Protection is the explosive and practical 5-star best-selling book from authors Abby Wynn and Mark Attwood, who both agree that humanity is in the midst of the biggest spiritual awakening in human history. If you feel like things ain't what they seem, if you feel you are under attack, get your weapons ready now. Weapons of Mass Protection. Practical tools for spiritual warfare. Out now.
Oh, that interesting.
Can I ask you a question, Janine?
Yes.
You mentioned the 3 little friends, and you said they all had names, but you didn't want to mention them here. And I'm not asking you to mention them. I'm just interested in why not?
Because to be honest with you, I don't want to call them in.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to check.
I don't want to call them in. I don't want to acknowledge them.
So that means that Janine, we're listening to now, has an understanding of this. Did you have this level of understanding of it then? I assume not.
Oh, good night. No. I was very pro medical being a psych major. I was very pro medicine, psychiatric help, all that, until I wasn't. When Donovan was in like about 17, I knew that the drugs weren't working, and because it never stopped the voices that he had and the anger that he had and all the other things that went along with when he went into his psychotic episodes, Mark. It was so it was very scary.
Did he threaten you when did he start threatening you?
When he was 15, when I took him off the meds, and then he was in college, graduated from high school. I homeschooled him. It was right after he totally stopped taking all of his meds. He stopped going to college. He got involved with some bad kids on the campus, and he started doing meth.
Oh boy, that's a devil's drug.
And then he would come home and he was selling pot, and I was very not there. And I told him, I said, you have to go back to school, because he was missing a lot of college. And I said, you're going to have to go back to school, or you're going to have to get a job, because I'm not having you sell drugs out of my house. And this is in Denver. And this is back when the Crips and the Blood gangs were all over the place. And two box music was booming in cars going up and down the streets, gangster, all gangster.
Could you just explain what you just said? Because I don't know what you mean by the Crips and the Blood box.
They're infamous gangsters that came out of California, and they were big in drugs, and and they moved into Colorado back in the 90s, and were they
South American?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not the. Well, I can't say that to be true. It could be a lot of Mexican gangs, that come from Mexico.
Because the reason I asked that question is because the new president of I'm going to forget the name of the country now. Is it El Salvador? Apparently people gangsters got taken out of South America and then satanized and then brought into America and down the coast.
Oh, I saw a video on that. Yes,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's not the Venezuelan gang that's up in
Venezuelan,
right now, but there's a couple of them. Yeah, they're really bad, very bad, and their tattoos are crazy. Their faces are tattooed and everything. Yeah, they're pretty scary.
This is the thing that interests me, because this fourth entity that came in. When did you say that was?
The third one. Donovan has told me that when he was about 12, which was around about the same time that he hurt the boys, it was about then, Mark. So I'd say about 12 is when he booted. His words to me on the phone recently in the last month, because we just started talking on the phone in the last month. He said that he booted those 3 out because this other one was taking over, and he liked this entity. They got along.
Did you get? Have you ever had an inkling of who that entity is? Because I get a very strong feeling, and you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong, because the entities have a hierarchical structure, and the lower level ones have to pave the way and pay up the line, and then it lets the way in for a more powerful one.
Yeah. I believe that the one that's here is the one in the monster poem. When Jerry reads that eventually today, he does have a name, and we can hold off for that. But he did have a name. He has a name, and he's the same entity that is still in Donovan today.
So there's been no success in removing him.
None at all. Nope. I hope eventually, but I don't know. But I can tell when he's going to come out, because he gets super anxious and he gets very agitated, and he gets, you can just, it's like if I'm going to describe it like from a ethereal, but like if I were going to describe it from a physical perspective, if it were a real thing, it's like when the monster wants to come out of Donovan, I can feel it. Okay, I know when it's coming. Most people who don't know Donovan, especially living on the streets, you don't know when he's going to go dark. When he goes dark, he goes dark. But when you're living with him, when I was living with him, you could feel, it's almost like, to describe it, it's like you can almost feel like he's coming out of Donovan's body, because Donovan's whole demeanor completely changes. He's not even... He's first of all, he has super strength, and the first thing I have to do is get him away from me, as far away from me as I can possibly get him, because he's very strong. He can be very violent and and he has very long arm span. It's part of this blood type thing he's got going on that was on his dad's side, but his fingers, he's 5'6". But he has a 5'9", almost 5'10" arm span. Because a man's arm span or a woman's arm span was what their height is, and his was abnormal. When he went into the state hospital, they pointed that out. It was part of this, I don't know, thing they did. This test they did.
Did he ever talk to you about the voices, hearing the voices, or did he keep that quiet from you?
He just had conversations with, the 3 ones, but this other one, the really ugly one, I never really ever heard him have conversation with him, other than I saw what he was like when he had his psychotic episodes and the monster came out. But there wasn't really any, I can't say that, because I'll tell you something. When the monster was getting ready to come out, he would be talking, like he would be guttural talking, but the voice that was coming out of him wasn't necessarily his. It was talking. It was very guttural, and he would be stomping around the house and having conversation. And I would say, "Are you talking to me? Is there something you need to say to me?" I need Donovan here. I need Donovan to be present. I would have to go into that place when I finally understood how to deal with Donovan's schizophrenia after many years of it. It was a matter of getting him in a place where I would call upon him, and that was through my own therapy. When Donovan gets ready to go into the psychotic episodes, you've got to ask him to come back. I want Donovan back. I want to talk to Donovan, because it's almost like DID, but it's not. Because the monster, when he's out, he's very hateful towards me. He's very aggressive and very hateful and evil.
You know,
totally evil.
And that's common. It once they start taking somebody over, anybody who tries to help them becomes an enemy.
Yeah.
You know, and mothers don't seem to understand that. They're very confused with that the voices see them as an enemy. And a lot of them don't understand that it's voices that are driving these people at that point.
I think had Donovan not been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and had I not known, I don't know how I would have dealt with it. So on that level, even though it was really bad news at that time, I am still to this day very grateful to know, because I had to learn how to navigate those waters. But I'm going to tell you right now, Mark, and anyone who's listening, with where I was in my life at that particular time in school and a teacher and music and all the things that I was doing, I was very much aware of what other people thought. So I swept Donovan's schizophrenia under the rug. People in the family really didn't know either. Even my kids, when Donovan murdered his girlfriend, my youngest son called me up on the phone and said, "Mom, I just saw this on the news. Can you please tell me what's going on?" You know, I didn't know Donovan had schizophrenia. Why didn't you tell me? Well, first of all, they were kidnapped and taken to South America. I didn't raise him. I said, that's something that your dad should have told you. He knew. And he was just completely taken aback by the whole thing. So I need you to understand that that's what I did. I swept the schizophrenia under the rug, because I tried to make Donovan have as much of a normal life as possible. I put him in Civil Air Patrol. I homeschooled him. He was super intelligent. I got him into college. Then he got off on the meth, and then it was over with. After that 17-year-old age where he was at, then it was done for me and him. He didn't want to come home. Although he did want to come home, but there wasn't a way for him to come home until he cleaned himself up, because I wasn't going to have the drug use. There was nothing. There was no changes. It just, this demonic energy that was within him just kept getting worse and worse and worse, more violent, and used Donovan with his strength and his abilities to do very bad things, and living on the streets. He just did.
Well, at some point he did come back and live with you for a while, right?
Yeah.
And what was that like?
He got married, and then his wife at that time they were pregnant. And they lived with me for the term of her birth. And honestly, Jerry, back in those days, Donovan did really well. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't taking any drugs. He was keeping his wife clean from drugs, while, she was pregnant. And he was very helpful. At that particular time, I had a husband who had Lou Gehrig's disease. It wasn't the same one. It was my third husband, and he eventually died. And so Donovan was very helpful with me, with my third husband, helping me care for my third husband who had Lou Gehrig's disease. So,
Janine,
it was good at that time.
So just for clarity for me, he, at the age of 17, he got into meth and he was out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But he cleaned himself up. What happened to him in that period? You said he went off and did bad things. What did he do?
Okay.
Yeah. Managed to clean himself up to the point where you let him back in.
Yeah. So, well, he just kind of went off on this rampage. He stole cars. He worked for a chop shop. He got money for the parts of the cars. He beat people up for fun. He got involved with Nazis, and that was a really bad thing for him, but it was a place where he was safe. They enveloped him. And that was not good, but he was also very independent on the streets. So he was chaotic. He just did a lot of crime, buying and selling drugs, stealing cars. And that was like from 17 till he was in and out of jail till he was about 21. And I'm talking about like county jail. He served time, he would get busted and he would serve a year or two, get out, and then they'd have some charges waiting for him. And then in the year 2000, he got in a gunfight in Aurora, Colorado, and it was over drugs and gun sales. And he robbed me, and he took a safe of mine and broke into it, and I had guns and money in there. And the guns that he used in the gunfight belonged to me, and they were registered. I had a permit. And the next thing that happened was I got a police call from the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department, our police department, that Donovan had been arrested and there had been some deaths involved. And in the gunfight in the middle of the night, there were bullets that were being shot out in the air. And of the three people that were killed, one of them was the guy that he had a bad deal with. And the other two people were just bystanders in their homes where the bullets went through the windows or through the house and killed those people. Yeah. So when he got arrested for that, he had been high on meth for 13 days. And he was not capable of serving or going to court. He wasn't sane. So they put him in this state hospital in Pueblo, Colorado for a while, for many years. And when the funding ran out of the state hospital, he was being medicated, and he was there. And when they ran out of funding, they had to go back to Arapahoe County to see if he was sane to be able to serve, to go to trial for those murders that happened, several years ago. And he was deemed sane. And then he got manslaughter. I think manslaughter 1 for that, because, that's how they did it. And in my personal opinion, as a mom, when that whole psychotic episode happened with him, I was really angry with the Arapahoe Police Department for a long time, because Donovan's slipped through the rungs in the ladder, if you will. If they could have just kept him there and literally got him for murder and given him more time, I don't know if it would have changed the dynamic of the outcome of what happened to him today, but, where he's at today. But I just believe that the violence that he was exuding at that time could have been handled differently. But as a mom, I really removed myself from him, because he threatened to kill me then. And then he got out in 2007 and he wanted to come and kill me then. So I just kind of removed myself from him at that point. Because
what happened during that episode, Janine?
When Donovan went to jail, or
no, when you said he was trying to kill you.
Oh, the threats frightened me. I mean, because I knew he was serious. I mean, Donovan isn't the kind of kid that was just. One of the things about Donovan, he's a big talker, but I'll tell you one thing, he does what he says he's going to do. That's what's scary about him. You get your bulldogs that wag the tail, that bark. Then you get your bulldogs that wag their tail and they bark and they attack you and they bite you. Donovan's that bulldog that wags his tail and bites you and enjoys it. Seriously.
Didn't you say there was one time he came up to your gate at night?
Now, that particular time was when he came back from Arizona, Jerry, when he was in Colorado after he had Allie's body for 43 days. He came to Arizona, and he called me on the phone right outside my gate, and my dogs were barking, and I didn't know. And then I heard his voice, and I'm telling you, I've never been so scared in my life. He had the back of his Ford truck open, where he backed up to the gate. I had a fenced yard. My dogs wouldn't let him in. And I think that honestly, truthfully, those dogs saved my life. I was able to run through the house, and I called 911. And then he left. He was never caught. And I firmly believe that had those police been able to get him that day, they would have found some part of Allie's body in that vehicle. But they thought, and this was during COVID, they thought I was lying. They didn't know about Donovan.
And when did you find out what he had done to Allie?
Well, I found out through a lawyer that was hired by the law firm I work for, that he called me, he text messaged me and said, Janine, it's all over the news, and then that's how I found out. Kind of.
Is Allie the same person that was living with you when they had a baby together?
No, that's his girlfriend, and he is still married to his wife to this day.
And he's still got a child?
He has two. Yeah, he has both. He lost custody to both of them, but his first wife, my granddaughter, is now 24.
Okay.
And yeah, she has suffered tremendously through all of this. She just has gone through so much. She's such a beautiful child, and I love her so much. And she came and lived with me in 2020, soon after this whole event happened, and stayed with me for about a month, and we processed through it. I hadn't seen her since she was 3 years old, and she remembered me, my touch. And it was just the weirdest way that we come back around. And I knew that I would see her again, but I certainly didn't think it was going to be under the circumstances of her father murdering, Allie the way he did. So, yeah, Donovan hasn't realized, he's realizing now. I told him on the phone the other day, you seem to not think anything about how your actions affected other people's lives. Well, it isn't just mine. It was your daughters. It was your sons. It was everybody that knew her, everybody that knew you. You hurt everybody when you murdered her. But he doesn't care about that. He doesn't care because she in his mind, she was driving him crazy. She was keeping him hooked on drugs. She was abusing their son. There was some sexual abuse there. And when he found out about all of that, that was his reasoning behind him killing her, which I don't believe. I think there's more to it than that. I tell him so.
How did you find out what he had done? When did that happen?
When Donovan murdered Allie? Well, so first of all, I'm going to go back to 2020. And right after COVID was announced, Denver was in a lockdown. I lived in Arizona. Arizona was in lockdown. And Donovan had just gotten out of jail, and he was living in a shelter. And his birthday's in April, Mark. So his birthday's April 24th. On the evening of April 24th, I had a very bad feeling in my stomach. And I hadn't heard from Donovan in about 3 days. He usually called me every day. I hadn't heard from him in about 3 days. So I made a decision. Well, actually, God was just saying, you've got to call the police, get a wellness check on Donovan, because he had been fighting, and I had just recently found out he had moved back in with Allie, and she had a restraining order on him. And I told him if he goes back to her, I was never going to talk to him again, because we all knew that if they got back together again, there was something bad was going to happen. He was either going to kill her or she was going to kill him. It was that serious. And so I called the Arvada Police Department, Jeffco, Arvada Police Department, and they did a wellness check, but they went to the wrong apartment, even though they had her current address, because she had ripped off a 7-Eleven for those vape cigarettes or whatever they are. And so, she was pending that court case. And I got a recorded call that I still have to this day that will be part of the book I'm writing. They said, well, we went and checked it out. The people that, we checked out wasn't your son, you're just probably a worried mom. I'm sure he's okay. They're just hunkering down because of COVID. Famous last words. So I got that voicemail later on that night. It was in about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I was like 8:30, and I got the voicemail about 10, but I didn't get the voice. I didn't listen to the voicemail to the next day. Well, then Donovan calls me up when I'm getting ready to go do a hike just to get out of the house. And he told me that, first of all, whenever he called me and Ellie was in the background, that she was always saying, "Are you calling your bitch of a mom?" And you could hear her just saying things about me, back there. And I said, "I can't hear Ellie. She's not cussing me out today. Where is she?" And he said, "Oh, she's at peace. She and I made peace." And this is on the 26th of April. And I said, "I have to go. I am going hiking. Quit calling me on Sundays." The next day, which was, I believe, a Monday. Yeah. He called me. It was on the 27th, whatever day that was, and of 2020 of April. He called me about 10 o'clock in the morning, and he said to me, "Mom, I need to talk to you. I've done something really bad." And I said, "Well, Donovan, there isn't really anything much worse that you could do than what you've done. Why don't you just talk to me about it?" And he said, "No, you don't understand. I've done something really bad." And then he proceeded to tell me that he had stabbed Allie 15 times. And she was dead. And she was laying in the bed in a fetal position. And while I was on the phone with him, he was picking her up and carrying her into the bathroom because she was telling him that she needed a bath. She needed to be cleaned up. These were the voices in his head telling him what to do. And I said, "Donovan, please, I'm begging you. Please don't touch her. Call the police, please. Whatever happened, if it was self-defense, whatever, just please don't touch her body. Just leave her alone." And he couldn't do it. And he hung up on me, and that was the last time I heard from him. We never spoke again until recently on the phone, just about a month ago. We've been writing each other letters, but I hadn't spoken to him. And that's how that went down, how I found out what Donovan had done and what he was going to do to her. Because I knew that if he got her in the, bathroom, in his state of mind that he was in.
So they still haven't found the body, right?
No. Nope.
Did he ever tell you what he had done to the body, or did you find that out some other way?
I had to find all of that out through the police department and through the newspapers and through the news, the news reports that were coming across the radio waves, if you will. And I saved everything and, as a matter of fact, I sent you, when I first met you, I sent you that article that was from one of the newspapers, I think, after I had met Sherry Sweeney and read your book. So, yeah. Well, that was really difficult. I'm not going to kid you. I mean, there's a whole lot of other things without getting into a lot of gory details, Mark, that he told me that day before he hung up with me.
I mean, we're not here as voyeurs with this, but I think this is an important story, and I really appreciate you sharing it because it is about demonic possession, really. And
yes, it is.
That is the thing that I'm. I think Jerry, I know Jerry is as well. I think getting people to understand that this stuff is real.
Yeah.
Sometimes takes something like this to sort of wake people up because
yeah,
and I'm interested to know, and I think the viewers will be, your progression. Firstly, how the hell did you survive this yourself as a mother? And secondly, when did you get to the point when you really understood what it was? That's what I'm interested in.
Well, I think when it comes to the demonic possession, and when Donovan was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and at that 15-year age when he was on the meds, is when my spiritual journey changed. When I realized that the meds weren't helping him, that was my wake-up call as a mom. And all my whole my husband then was totally against that, but I'm sorry, that just wasn't an option for me. Diet was. Getting him active in like Civil Air Patrol and other things was, getting him in a social environment and getting him, stability and structure was important, because Donovan he's a Taurus and he really enjoys structure. So that worked for a while until it didn't, till the entity, the demonic possession, the parasitic entity, got darker in his life when he got super violent with me when he turned 17. And this was when we were going through the divorce, about the kids, finding the videos and all that stuff. It just imploded, exploded and imploded at the same time, actually. So when I did find out, that became a journey for me, but it also was, so we're talking about, let me see, what would be the years, 1990, 1, 2, 3, 4, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. Okay, in these years, there was a lot of changes in the world that were going on, I believe, but some things that you just never talked about was schizophrenia and mental illness. You just kind of, if you were in therapy, which I was, because of the divorce, losing my kids, this thing happening with Donovan, honestly, therapy saved my life. Talk therapy really saved my life, because I didn't have to share it with my friends, because I was kind of a private person even back then. So the therapy helped me, but it didn't change what was going on in my life at that time. It was just a devastation. It was like one war zone after the other, and a fight, always constantly a battle, a spiritual battle. And I was 33 years old, and I felt like, God, do I have to go through any more of this? What is going on? And having that. And then there was just one day, I just looked up and I said, I'm doing a terrible job at managing my life. Can you just please come in and just do something here, because I can't do this anymore. If you're going to use me, please just take my body and guide me in the right direction, do something. But I need to understand what my role is here, because it was like a hamster wheel until it wasn't, till I had that awake moment of self-realization that God is trying to tell you something. He's stopping you all along the path, and then finally embracing that. And the situation with Donovan was a little bit different when he murdered his girlfriend, because that part of my life, I realized, okay, that's my journey to get from point A to point B, never understanding that Donovan would ever do something as bad as what he did. So when I went through that journey with Donovan, it was the most horrible thing I've ever gone through. I have no words to even express to you because it was 2020 and there was no therapy available. Nobody knew how to navigate the waters of COVID. I got double lung pneumonia, and I was sick for 6. And plus I was managing a high profile case at the time. Still am doing that, but I had to take a sabbatical for 18 months. The lawyers were just profoundly wonderful with me. I don't know what I would have done without their understanding.
Janine, what was your communication like with him once he got locked up in prison?
Letters, mostly till recently. Letters.
What were those like?
Well, awful. The letters he started writing me after, he'd been in prison for 2 years now, because he pled guilty and he avoided trial. So the first letter I got from him from prison was on June 28th of 2023. And his writing wasn't so bad then, but he was, wanting me to feel sorry for him and all the other things that go, with it's your fault that I'm in prison, wanting to do all the blame and everything. And, it's always been between a Janine and mom. He hadn't really called me mom because he just separated himself. The monster doesn't want him to have a relationship with me anyway.
Yeah.
But I will show you something, Mark, that you'll see and it's not, I'm not going to read the letter or anything, but I do want you to look at the handwriting if you can see it. The handwriting is pretty stable, you know, it's pretty stable. You can see that his handwriting, it looks like, you know, it's kind of sloppy, but a normal person's handwriting. But when the monster writes,
Yeah, I've seen this same phenomena also.
yeah.
The writing from the monsters all.
So if you
a
can look
mess.
at that, you can see a tremendous difference in the handwriting. This is when his monster's out. And it's just jagged handwriting and scribbling. And you see how very hard to read in some cases. But you know, and that was one of the worst letters. Jerry knew that. As a matter of fact, Jerry said, please don't talk to him anymore. And I really think
it was an awful letter.
It was, yeah.
It was it was one of the worst letters I've ever heard in my life. You said you had some pictures he drew also, Janine?
Yeah. So this will be a good example of what schizophrenia is. And keep in mind, Donovan is on the high spectrum of violence. Okay. Not all schizophrenic people are like Donovan. I want you to understand that going into this. So Donovan, I'm going to tell a story. So in the mind of a schizophrenic person, and I can pretty much say that this is probably how it is with all of them, but not all of them. So schizophrenic people are super sensitive people. They are empaths and they're super, super sensitive. They feel everything. When Donovan was little, he felt everything, everybody's emotions. He was very sensitive, super sensitive kid, really sensitive. So I dealt with that, not understanding what was going on. Okay. Just that was me being a mom to my son. Those are things that I noticed. Over the course of time, and the violence ensued and the crimes ensued. One of the things that I learned about the way he thought is he compartmentalized everything. So the way that I can describe it from a visual perspective is just imagine a really super long tunnel and a hallway. Okay. And on each side of the hallway, every 10 feet, there's a door. Every single door that schizophrenic person who has schizophrenia has a memory there of something they did when they were in a psychotic episode.
You've just described The Shining.
Oh, geez. I didn't think about that.
You've just described, that's extra. Stanley Kubrick's Shining is using that metaphor all the way through that.
Oh my gosh. Do you know, that just gives me goosebumps because that is exactly what it is. Like when they stretch that hallway. Oh my, Mark, of all the shows that Jerry and I have done, you're the first one that's ever pointed that out.
Well, The Shining came to me when we started talking, where because the knife in the ground just made me think of the knife in the door.
Yeah. And and then when you get to the end of that hallway, then it forks off because now the entity has done a lot of things and now it's a split entity. It's going to go one direction or the other. The older that Donovan got, the more violent he got, the more this entity was stronger and really bad. So you get at the end of that tunnel or hallway, then the hallway branches out and it's the same thing. Every 10 feet, there's doors on either side and there's more memories that are there. And Donovan will be the first one to tell you he compartmentalizes. So one of the first pictures he sent to me, and this would have been, let me see, he wrote me a letter on May 4th of 2024. That's this year. So I want you to take a look at this picture. This is a pencil picture that he drew. Do you see how there's doors, but they're brick shut now? There's no handles on the doors and they're stacked on top of one another. And it just goes on and on and on. So where he's at, let me see what the date is on this one. 11/26/2023. So this picture was drawn in 11/26 of 2023. This is after the murder, 2 years after. Now, when I look at this, the first thing I think of, well, he has bricked up all of those memories. They're never going to come out because there's no door handles. But that's what, and I've been describing this for years about what a schizophrenic thinks and how they compartmentalize. And then he sent me this picture. And this says it all about what schizophrenic, how a schizophrenic mind thinks.
Do you think it's time that we change the term schizophrenia?
Absolutely. It's not a disease.
No,
Because
it's not a disease.
that picture you just showed me is exactly what's going on with the collective mind of people that have lived.
Absolutely. 100%. Oh, you're just going to make me just have tears right now.
Well, it's a coping mechanism of the spirit, isn't it?
Absolutely.
How else do you cope with demonic possession? Because they are so unbelievably evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is amazing.
And the light's going to win. When I went to the dark night of the soul after this, and it took me 2 years to come out of it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you that because obviously the way you are is extraordinary, and you know, and you've managed to get through this without closing all those doors and facing it, and that's how the light wins. I think. I don't know what Jerry thinks of that.
I embraced the darkness, and I learned to walk with it. Yeah. I sunk into it. I sunk into the depths of the dregs of the darkness. I don't think I've ever been in a place of such darkness as I was those years.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That's what that means, isn't it?
That's right. There was a YouTuber by the name of Trevor Isley, and I will say his name out loud. He saved my life. He had some great series on the Dark Night of the Soul. Love that man. He saved my life. His videos did, because I'd listened to him over and over again, and he got me out of the Dark Night of the Soul. I want to show you another picture. He sent this to me at the same time. He just drew this picture of this woman. He doesn't know who she was, but she came to him. That's how he thinks. He's a very psychic child. He's a very...
Do you know what's interesting about that picture?
Isn't it beautiful?
Well, for me, you were moving it, but she was moving within it.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that's the camera.
He's oh, I see. She's very there's something about her. I don't know if she was an angel that came into him, but he sent me her. And I treasure this. I know I treasure these pictures that he's drawn, because as a kid, I always had him draw pictures. How I could tell where he was at mentally was through his art and his poems. His poems were so revealing.
Do you want me to read the poem he wrote about the voices?
Yeah, why don't you, Jerry?
Okay.
Let's go there.
I don't know where this fit in as far as a timeline.
There should be a date on it. Look and see. There should be a date either in the bottom or the upper right-hand corner. I don't know.
Well, this was written in pencil, so it kind of fades in and out.
Okay.
Okay. So let me see what the title is. It's There Is a Monster is what he entitled it. Okay, and it's written in pencil, so I have a hard time reading it. He said, there is a monster that lives in my head. Let me get my glasses a second. My eyes are blurred.
I think he wrote that. I'm certain he wrote that in prison. I don't know exactly what the date is on that. When he started sending me poems back in 1998, when he was in jail, I made him date stuff and number them, so that we could keep track of them.
Okay, now I can see better. It says, there is a monster that lives in my head. This monster is real. It's not under my bed. My monster tells me things to do. It tells me sometimes when the news is new. So it's like it's telling him things that he's not getting from any other place. He said, my monster is crying as it spent all the years drowning out my courage and disposing my fears. My monster is strong. That's what I like to think. My monster is coming when it's time to drink. So here he's saying when he drank alcohol, the monster was cut loose. My monster is ready. My monster is strong. What will I do when my monster is gone? My monster will never leave. That is his plan. It overwhelms me when I'm making a stand. So even though he tries to, I've seen this in the prison where one prisoner told me, hey, when I get into a fight, it's not me fighting, it's my voices take over and they're doing the fighting for me.
Yeah.
So when he says my monster overwhelms me when I'm making a stand, that's what came to mind for me. There is a monster inside of me. I thought it was strong. How could this be? Or I thought I was strong. How could this be? My monster has a name too. He walks in the dark whispering Yazoo. And somebody told me Yazoo was an Indian tribe. My monster is watching me. He won't tell you my name. My monster is the shadows you cannot see. His heart is heavy. He plays for the game. My monster is aware. He wants to be monster. So this is the voices. They are aware. These aren't hallucinations. They are aware of what's going on and the effect they're having on these people. He says he wants to be monster. He's as blood from a lake. His bond is with me, now monster. He has nothing else to do. My monster is awake.
Yeah. That's a true story. That is Donovan in a nutshell.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Have you ever considered an exorcism?
Yes. Many times. And Donovan, I couldn't get him into the church long enough to do it. Actually had a exorcist priest. I'm Catholic, was baptized in the Catholic Church. And all my kids were baptized also. And had an exorcist from Africa who was a priest at St. Thomas More Parish, actually, where we were married. My second husband and I were married. And I couldn't get him in the church long enough to even have it done. I did have him come and bless the house, but that was after Donovan was gone. Yeah.
Have you ever done past life regression, Janine?
Yes, I have.
And what did that bring up?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I had past life regression. I was married. I lived in Australia, and I was a hunter-gatherer. I was the wife of an Indian who was he was a very powerful Indian, and he was actually my third husband who had Lou Gehrig's disease. He's the one we got into the past life regression with because we were so connected. It wasn't even funny. It was weird. So we decided to do the past life regression. And that was the first time I ever had it. But the second time I had a past life regression, I was also a Victorian debutante woman in the 1800s. And I lived in England, in London. So I have an interesting past life history. I have 9 past lives.
Did you ever find a past life link with Donovan?
Yes. Yes. He goes back to warrior. I had a reading done on him as well as me. And when he came through my womb. I became his mother. I was his mother. But his destiny was already there. He was a warrior. He goes way back to like 900 BC. He was a killer. He was a protector. He was a warrior. And he came into this with many past lives with that same, but he wasn't able to guide it. This body that he occupied, his soul that occupies his body, his human body was not strong enough to carry the weight of this soul that occupied him. So he made, as a human ego, made bad choices, and that's part of the other part of this story that I have delved into. I have called upon many wonderful astrologers to work with me during this journey, because what is above, so is below, and everything has a time meter and a snapshot of our souls when we come into this earth. So very much knowledgeable of that.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I'm also interested in the spelling of your name.
Jinean. Okay, well, my family, the Florom family, I'm adopted. And so I grew up in Wyoming on the Indian reservation, but my family that adopted me were Floroms. So they go to France. They came to Ellis Island and then became part of the railroad in the 1800s, mid 1800s. And so that's where that name comes from. Janine is from my great grandmother on my father's side of the family. My mother was Jewish, and that adopted me. And she was a Pentecostal pastor in the town I grew up in on the Shoshone and Arapaho Indian Reservation, central Wyoming, Riverton. And that's where my name, but my biological family is Walsh from Ireland, who came to America and helped free the Irish during the IRA period of time, and helped free the Irish slaves in Pennsylvania. So my biological family is on that realm of, so I've done a lot of that research. Pretty interesting life.
No, it sounds it.
Yeah.
I'd say there was there's usually a lot more to our lives than appearance.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was part of my growth. I had to learn how to understand that world, because when I found out I was adopted, that was kind of a hard pill for me to swallow. But I was raised as an only child, but
I've never seen a Janine spelt that way, and when
that's her name, that's how she spelled it.
Yeah, and when I saw it, do you know what jinn means in Islam?
I do not. Do you know?
I think it's an interesting coincidence, considering
I hadn't noticed that until you brought it up.
Please tell me. I'm sitting here.
There's another N with the formal jinn, double N. Yeah,
but it's also spelled with one N as well.
Oh my goodness! You just hit me. Seriously, the spirits.
Isn't that interesting?
Oh. My goodness gracious. And my birthday's on the 11th of December. And that's the door of numerology, of opening doors in spirituality. And I walk on that path. I am very connected to my soul energy.
Well, this is I mean, I'd like to hear you explain to the audience why you said you're writing a book about this. What's I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you have been given a mission here on these experiences, and what would that be?
Well, I had a long talk with God during those 2 years when I was in the dark night of the soul, just screaming and screaming, wondering what in the heck's going on here? Why is this happening to me? And then I met Jerry. I listened to Sherry on Robert Phoenix's show. And then I sought Jerry out, and I was still going through a lot of dark night of the soul even then. But what I knew is when the answer came to me, it was earth shattering. And the message from God to me was, I had to take you to the darkness. I had to take you to the dark night of the soul. You had to go see what's there, because what is coming upon this world, and the darkness and the trauma that people are going through. If you didn't go to the depths of the dregs of the darkness, you cannot be a light to those. You must be darker than they. Well, in order to be able to help them. And that's where it came from.
One reason I wanted to give Janine a voice is that I've run into mothers of schizophrenics over and over and over again throughout the years. And these voices hate mothers.
Yes, they
Yep.
do.
They hate family. They hate relatives. They want to isolate the person. And the mother is always trying to help. So
Yeah.
they hate her more than most other people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I've seen mothers get hurt over and over and over again
Yeah.
because they don't realize what these voices are and how much they're hated. And the more they try to help their kid, the more hatred that these things generate toward them. They do not want
Mm-mm.
any interference with them taking over the children of these mothers.
They do
And
not.
I've seen mother after mother after mother get hurt and some killed by their children, who, not realizing that their children are being taken over or under the control of these demonic entities.
Mhm.
Well, this is this leads me to my next question, really, because obviously, to me, Janine, you're a very powerful woman, and I do feel like there is an element of what they do is about this hatred of that
Mhm.
feminine energy. Because if we look at, we are, you know, the feminine energy is rising,
Yes.
and it's something that has been decapitated and subjugated and destroyed over, you know, according to recent history, for a long time. And part of me thinks that is part of it, you know, to get,
Mhm.
you know, how that's why I asked you early on, how does a mother, because you know, I'm a father of 5 children, and I just kept putting myself in your shoes while you're going, and you know, and I'm not a mother, it's a different feeling.
Yes, understood.
So how, you know, when my daughter got Tourette's during COVID, I could feel what she was going through, because it was a psychological operation, and she's very sensitive and
Yeah.
empathic, a great artist, and
Mhm.
all of that kind of stuff. But you know, fortunately, she's not succumbed, because the demonics have fought very hard to they come through children. They try
Yes,
to
they
break
do.
those bonds, because that bond of love is so powerful and so beautiful that it's one of their greatest prizes, along with, I believe, suicide is one of their greatest prizes.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
you know, that's why I thought that was I think what you're doing is, and Jerry, both of you, is extremely important to help us get a greater understanding of this, because it's the invisible enemy.
It is. Evil is out there. And I believe strongly any woman who has gone through not I first of all, I want to be very clear about something. Everything is relative to everybody's life. Some people will say, "Oh my God, Janine, you know, what you've gone through is so bad." But everybody went through a lot of bad on their own during COVID. Everybody went through trauma. Our entire world is traumatized. It's not just about America. It's every country in our world. And it was a Holocaust, to say the least. And I will stand by that and go to my grave on that. What has happened to our people, and are the people of the world that did not deserve this. Now, when you put schizophrenia in the mix of all of this, and then you wonder all the medicines and all the pharmaceuticals, it even made me want to fight with Jerry even harder against the pharmaceutical industry when it comes to this, because we're not dealing with a bunch of people who are bipolar, manic depressive. We're dealing with trauma that was caused by people in power. And it's awful what we've had to go through.
Well, what I think, I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, but for me, they're not human.
That's right.
They're not human. And a lot of them have not been human for a very long time. And there are spirits living through, there are entities living through
absolutely
the ruling class.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in order to control the rest of us, they have to set their army, their legions. It's principalities of darkness. That's what we're dealing with. But in this life, it transpires as schizophrenia or psychotic behavior or wars, whatever we've had to live through. So that's why these stories are so important to be told, in order to get a deeper understanding. But on your journey, have you, you know, because when I said at the beginning of the show that I found it very almost embarrassing to talk about my experiences with demons in my life, But when I did it, I came off that show and I slapped myself on the forehead, and I was like, "Oh, I had a business at the time. I was like, I'm ruined." You know, people. I'm talking about demonic entities on YouTube, and then I got all these emails from people from all around the world saying, "Yes, same with me," but I never spoke about it because they compartmentalized it, or it'd been knocked out of them, or it was made embarrassing, or somebody made fun of them when they were younger, and it just became. It got swept under the carpet and hidden. And then the amazing thing about the last 4 years is this stuff is now coming up.
Yes.
Because it is being faced, as you've said.
Yes.
You've had your personal journey of that.
Yes.
Jerry's had a journey of that. I've had my journey of that. But the whole population has, and it's like getting them to understand they're not alone.
Yes.
Is a huge job, and I think
it is. It's a big job. And do you know? I got to tell you, when Sherry Sweeney had that interview with Robert Phoenix, and I was in the Dark Night of the Soul, and that's how I learned about Sherry Sweeney. Do you know? When I heard her story, and I don't know if you know Sherry's story or not. It's a tragic story.
Yeah, she's the co-author of my book.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And at that very moment, I so related to her with the demonic and the presence of evil and love, the importance of love and the importance of embracing it with love. It made me want to seek out Jerry even harder, because especially after I read the book. And when I have to tell you that when I saw that video of that interview, Robert Phoenix is a mundane astrologer, a very good one. And I knew I could relate to her, and I needed, my soul craved a relationship with Sherry. My soul craved, I didn't know Jerry at the time, but my soul craved a relationship with Jerry because I knew they would understand. And my approach with Jerry, when I wrote him the letter, when I found him, I wrote him the letter, was, I haven't seen you interview any moms. I was wondering if I could be the mom of a schizophrenia, if you would take me on. I have a story for you. And I told him my story in a letter. But that's how strongly I felt with helping get the message. I felt like if there's a way that we can all educate people that schizophrenia is not a disease, and Jerry's already out there already, and that it's a lie. It's absolutely a lie. And that we are in a war of attrition in this world between good and evil. We must be the light that shines into the darkness. And that's the job I know I've been given. And I know that Jerry feels that way too, because he is just a huge light source energy. And
I have so many people write me and thank me for saying, you're the only one I know that understands.
Yeah.
There's one guy who wrote, it was really interesting. He goes, now that I know that the voices aren't me, I got this.
Yes.
That's all he said.
Yeah.
That's a massive thing to insight, though.
Yeah.
That's the big one. If we could get I've been saying the same thing, and I'm like, these voices, the devil and the angel. If you just
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly right. That's the big one, because they're not going to recover unless they realize that these things are entities. They don't belong to them. They're coming from the outside. They are not who they are. But the voices want them to believe that they are the voices. Yeah. And I don't know how many patients I've had that would ask them, who are you? What are you? And they would say, we are you.
Yeah, we are you.
If you believe that, you become who they are. And they're consummate liars. They lie about everything. And it's critical for people to understand that these things are running fixed, unswerving patterns. Yeah. And I have them all listed on my website under jerrymarzinsky.com. Go to articles. All those patterns are there. You can see them for yourself. They're not hidden. They're not hidden behind a chemical imbalance or a genetic anything. If you're working with schizophrenics or you have a schizophrenic child, you can see these patterns in them.
Yeah.
If they're running patterns, these things are not hallucinations. Hallucinations don't run patterns.
That's right. They're very real, and when the monster comes out, they're very real. And any mom any mom, whether they're violent, whether the children or the family member is violent or not, you can feel that parasitic demonic energy start coming through, because they're fighting to get out of the human body while they're in the human body, because the human body is it's a parasite. The human body, they work through the human body to the weak. And it's not because the person is actually weak-minded. It's not even about being a weak-minded person. It's about being super sensitive, because sensitive people they feel everything. And the energies, the dark energies, they know that. So they want to grab at that human body.
Yeah, they go after the ones that are emotionally and psychologically wounded.
Yeah.
And they are parasites. They do suck your energy.
Yeah.
They hit us all. They don't just get schizophrenic. They hit us all.
Yeah.
You
Every
walk
day.
around, then you have this random thought come into your head that's just horrible. I had one guy write me. He said, "Well, you're right. I was behind my boss the other day, and this voice came into my head and said, spit on him." So yeah, they hit us all. It's not just schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, 100%.
The psychiatry, psychology never asked the question, where do thoughts come from? They don't ask that question. All behavior is generated by thought. There's a thought first, and then comes a behavior. So they study the behavior, but they don't study the source of the behavior, which is the thought. And they don't ask the question, where does the thought come from?
And that's also true of manifestation.
Yeah, exactly. Thoughts become things.
Thoughts are things, literal things. And our brains are transceivers. We're transmitting and receiving. So I got it quite a long time ago that they're transmitting in here in order to get us to create this.
Yeah, right.
Our own prison.
Right.
Yeah, our own prison. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's what we're breaking out of.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a truth.
We've got two more optimists here. This is good, and this is people who've been through a lot, right? So if you're
I have a poem for you if you want to hear it. It's a short one, but this is one I picked out for today. It's called The Lost Ones. He wrote this on 8/28/2005. He was in prison at that time for the 3 murders in that gunfight I was telling you about. So it's called The Lost Ones. And I thought it's kind of interesting how this one's coming about with what we've been talking about, because it talks about God and it talks about souls. What about those that are forgotten, for the souls that roam in a realm that no one knows, and the icy feelings you feel when they are near, trying to heal cowards that was good. Should I start over?
Start over.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry about that. That was switched up. Honestly, my WhatsApp was not on my computer, and it just ran. It wasn't. I made sure I turned because it often happens to me. That was a definite fiddle. I apologize for that.
Jerry and I have these kinds of things that happen to us all the time with these little buggers that pop up in our lives that want to interfere. See, that wasn't a coincidence.
No, I know.
Yeah.
So thank you.
So it's called The Lost Ones. What about those that are forgotten, for the souls that roam in a realm that no one knows? And the icy feeling you feel when they are near, trying to heal cowards that was given in this world's other dimension all alone. And they show themselves so very often and cause mischief in their dealings to show all of us fear. Some try to warn us of imminent doom, and some by anger they are driven, screaming so loud, but no one could hear. This is somewhere that I might go, that I fear, lost in the darkest shadows of grief, crying for salvation. Next will never be, never getting relief, reliving each moment of my fate, of my passing in that hour, my soul for the darkness to devour, where I will become one of the lost ones, forever trying to repent, way too late, a reject from the heavenly gate. When I was going through poems, Jerry said, pick one that you can read. That one just jumped out at me. I've never read that one before. I mean, I've read it before. It's in my database, but I felt like it was such a good one. I didn't know where our conversation was going to go most of the time. When you do these shows, you never know kind of which direction they're going to go. So it kind of leaned towards the soul part of it. And I think it's important to understand that people with schizophrenia, they're human beings. They're not demons. And yes, are they capable of doing really awful things? But are the demons that live inside of them capable of doing awful things? Absolutely. My son is a prime example of that. But it doesn't mean that they're any less of a human being. And just because, I mean, I can promise you with everything I am, I would never wish anything of what I've gone through. When you talk about relabeling schizophrenia, it's huge because, there's so many people on the YouTube channels and some of these people that talk about, I think I went schizophrenic for a moment. And I cringe when people say that. It's like, oh, you just don't understand. Please don't use that word. You're using it so wrong. That's not what it's about. Don't call upon it. Please, I beg you. But people have gotten to use it like it's a really cool term. There's no freaking thing cool about schizophrenia.
That's why we need a new term.
No, it's not acceptable for anybody. I'm sorry to say, oh, that was so schizophrenic. If you don't understand it, don't use the word until you know what it's about. Schizophrenia is not a disease, but it's certainly not a term. That's like, I'm sorry, please forgive me for anybody. It's like calling somebody retarded, or, going back to those old days. I know there's a lot of prideful things, but you just don't do that. No. And it's been, Jerry, have you noticed how people are using the word schizophrenia like it's a really cool thing to say these days anymore? It's awful. You see it on TikTok, you see it on all over the place, And
the kids are using some terrible words. I have the same issue with mine. I'm like, where are you getting these words from? It's like, I would never say that,
right?
To my parents or to anybody. And my kids are good kids, But that, again, we're in a spiritual war.
We are.
This is the thing that not everybody's grasped yet.
Yeah.
That's why you can't explain it in normal terms, but you can. And the changing behavior that we've seen over the last 10 years, at least, on a mass scale, is because these fourth dimensional entities just showing themselves more and more and more, which is the good thing, I think, about this, actually.
They're surfacing.
Yep, we're seeing.
We've got our swords out and we're going to cut their heads off.
Well, yes,
we're done. That it's a spiritual warfare, and it is, and that's why I love Jerry's work so much, because Jerry has been able to get across all culture barriers. I wish we were more popular in America than we are in Europe. I mean, Jerry's videos are all over the place in Europe, France, Australia, Africa, America, maybe once in a while. We just did an interview with somebody in Mississippi, and that was the first American interview Jerry and I have done. Isn't it, Jerry? Maybe? I think so. Most everybody else is not in America.
I've got the majority of my audience is American, so this is.
Oh, see how lucky we are to have you.
Well, look,
here with us
I feel the same. I would. I'm going to have to wind it up, because I've actually been making dinner for my kids. And,
there you go. No
that's
problem.
That's why they're ringing, because they're hungry. And I've made them a very special lasagna. It's taken hours, but and this is it. I have to get back to normal life, and having, holding all these thoughts at the same time is a part of this spiritual war. And very grateful to you for sharing that, and for Jerry to bring you onto this show. I'd like to also ask about the book or anything. If there's a place where people can find you, can I direct them anywhere?
Here's the book Sherry and I wrote. This is the Sherry that Janine was talking about. Yeah. And this will tell you how we came to the conclusion, Sherry and I both, that these voices were not hallucinations.
Yeah.
I actually had one prisoner whose voice came out and told me, "You have no right to interfere with our way of life.
Yeah.
Mm.
I've been quoting you since you told me that on my show a lot, because it resonates hugely. I think that's the kind of thing they used to say to me when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's the one that woke me up.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing the levels of waking up that we all go through? You know, I look back, as much as it was a trying time for me in 2020, 21, 22, and just about a little bit of 2023. We all have our own journeys, and look how we're connected today, getting this message out. And this is a godsend. This is a miracle. All three of us are in different places, and here we are able to talk about this and be the love that we are, to let people know, just because people do ugly things doesn't mean we don't be love in our world. We have to be love to everybody.
Okay.
We have to be
Janine,
love.
let's let Mark get to feed his kids before they
Yes.
invade.
Yes. Yes.
No, it's a beautiful way to end it. Your book, Janine, when is that coming out?
Well, my granddaughter and I are collaborating, and I talked with Donovan over the phone, and I asked him if he would be interested in collaborating also in the book. I do want to insert some of his poetry, and he's open for me sending him the book to read and putting his own story together. But he's also going to be writing some things and sending them to me. And we're just going to approach this head on and do some, a story about what it's like, and, of being a mom, having schizophrenia, and also being a daughter with a father who has schizophrenia. And I think it's going to be a really good way for all of us to heal. And anyone who's going through trials and tribulations like this, it won't be something that you have to think like I'm all alone and there's nobody out there like me. But there's people out there that can help, and I hope to be one of those people. I'm excited. I've got an outline, and I'm excited about where this book is going to go.
Well, I do have a publishing company, and
oh, you do?
I could be quite interested in that if you need
help. I
help.
would love to talk with you.
It's the kind of thing I want to publish.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, I'm gonna call it a day here, and thank you both very much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure. It's great to see you again, Jerry, and lovely to meet you, Janine. And
pleasure being with you. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching.
And Jerry, thank you so much.
All right.
Please do share this story far and wide, guys, and God bless you all. I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.